to send an overhaul program to Brussels. Gdansk and other shipyards represent the cradle of the Solidarity movement, which helped trigger the fall of communism in Poland. The Polish economy minister has said privatization could save the companies. State aid for all 3 yards was estimated at €1.5 billion. Poland joined the EU in 2004. An EU review of its blacklist of terrorist organizations next month could clear the way for the People's Mujahideen Organization of Iran, or MEK, to operate openly in Europe. The British government has been considering how to respond to a May the 7th Court of Appeal ruling that said outlawing the group in 2002 was wrong. Meanwhile, key figure among Iranian opposition groups Maryam Rajavi has brought the case up the European Parliament's debate agenda. In Brussels, Rajavi said the name of the Mujahideens must be taken off the list to show that Europe is against the regime of the mullahs. As Rajavi sees it, this list was a concession to the mullahs who requested it. She said it's the result of political complaisance. At the moment, however, the EU does not want to derail efforts to restart international talks on Iran's nuclear program. MEK began as a leftist Islamist opposition to the late Shah of Iran, but fell out with Shiite clerics who took power after the Islamic Revolution there. MEK's critics say it works like a sect and brainwashes its followers. Rajavi has convinced British Conservative MP David Jones and others to give it a hearing.
And if the highest court in Britain, apart from the House of Lords, has decided that the British government's prescription is unlawful, then I think that the EU has got a positive duty to pay attention to that. The EU itself is a creation of law, and it's also an institution that should reside on the rule of law. And if in fact it doesn't do that, then it stands for nothing at all.
MEK also has an appeal pending at the European Court of Justice. As non-violent, it says it shouldn't be considered in the same light as Al-Qaeda or Hezbollah, also on the EU terrorist list. International law professor Eric David in Brussels says the European Council should bow to the decision taken by the EU's Court of First Instance to truly annul the Council decision to put the People's Mujahideen Organization of Iran on the list of terrorist organizations. In 2003, French authorities arrested dozens of MEK members they believed were involved in financing and planning attacks. Several in the MEK put themselves to the torch in the streets of Paris in protest. The group claims to have renounced violence and is lobbying hard to have this accepted. In its present status, its accounts are frozen and its room to act is limited.
Now a look ahead at some of the key European events in the coming week.
Experience wild beauty. Montenegro brings you the weather. was brought to you by Montenegro, the wild beauty.
This is EuroNews, with the news on the half hour.
Swiss voters have rejected a proposal by the right-wing Swiss People's Party that would have made it more difficult for foreigners to become naturalised citizens. The controversial proposal aimed to give local communities the power to decide by a popular vote which immigrants are granted a passport, with no right of appeal. The People's Party and its Vice President, Christoph Blocher, have long campaigned on an anti-immigration ticket. Foreigners make up 20% of the Swiss population, and the latest referendum is the 6th time the SVP has launched a vote on the subject. It's good news for the multi-party government, which rejected the initiative it considered arbitrary and discriminatory. The Swiss electorate agreed.
One person was killed and several others wounded as shooting broke out during voting in the general election in Macedonia. Gunfire erupted in Aracinovo, a village in the north of the capital Skopje. An Albanian party official is among the victims. Supporters of a rival Albanian party are being blamed. Macedonia is the only republic to emerge from the 1990s breakup of Yugoslavia without bloodshed. But tensions simmering within its Albanian community sparked violence during the early years of this decade and during this election campaign. The new Prime Minister will probably need a coalition partner to govern, expected to be one of the Albanian parties. Popular Prime Minister Nikola Gruevski called the election early after Greece vetoed Macedonia's application to join NATO. He's expected to ride to victory on voters' subsequent feelings of nationalism, although he may not win an overall majority. Gruevski's main rival is the Social Democrat leader Radmila Sekarenska, a liberal who's equally keen on NATO and the EU. The election is a test of Macedonia's political maturity. An EU and NATO future rests equally on the result and on the conduct of the poll itself. The violence has worried Western governments and may cripple Macedonia's ambitions. 3 people have been injured in an explosion in Spain's Basque Country. A woman claiming to represent the Basque terrorist group ETA phoned a warning an hour before the bomb went off in the town of Zarautz. The bomb was placed outside the offices of a building firm working on Spain's new high-speed train line. 2 policemen were deafened in the explosion and a passerby suffered head injuries. It's the first ETA attack since the arrest last month of Javier López Peña in the French city of Bordeaux. He's believed to have been ETA's political and military chief for the past 2 years. Last week, ETA admitted 4 other attacks, including one on May the 14th, which killed a Spanish policeman. More than 800 people have died in ETA's 40-year armed struggle for an independent Basque homeland.
The smile masks a crushing disappointment. As Hillary Clinton campaigned for today's primary in Puerto Rico, the Democrat Rules Committee was sounding a death knell for her presidential campaign. Amid scenes of high emotion, it voted to only allow delegates, one in Michigan and Florida, to count for half, after both states held primaries early. She had been hoping to cut the lead between her and Barack Obama going into the final round.
At the door to please secure the doors.
Her supporters weren't going to take it sitting down. The Clinton camp may appeal.
She's got the popular vote, honey, and the popular vote is more important than anything else. If you can't take the popular vote in consideration, why do we even have a primary?
Clinton gets 50% of the delegate support from Florida and roughly the same from Michigan. She'll probably take Puerto Rico, but it's unlikely to be enough to beat him. There's a few votes and days to go until the Obama camp will feel it can really party. In the meantime, the candidate and his wife have quit their church, the scene of many controversial speeches in recent weeks.
I'm confident that we're going to be able to find a church that we feel comfortable with, and that will reflect our concerns and our values.
The Puerto Rican vote is unlikely to be a decider. That's more likely to be down to South Dakota and Montana on Tuesday. But Hillary Clinton may still try to persuade the convention that they should give the candidacy to her for taking more votes overall than Obama.
No US presidential hopeful can ignore Puerto Rico and its 55 delegates. A week ago, Illinois Senator Barack Obama went on a caminata or walkabout on the Caribbean archipelago, embracing the local tradition aimed at bringing candidates closer to the people.
We have great support here in Puerto Rico. And the most important support is not the support from the elected officials. It's not support from the powerful, but it's support from the people.
His Democratic rival Hillary Clinton was also on the campaign trail. She reminded crowds of her ties to Puerto Rico, first as First Lady when Bill Clinton was president, and now as Senator of New York, home to some 1 million Puerto Ricans. She pledged to represent all the island's people in Congress.
That starts with enabling the people of Puerto Rico to decide the fundamental question of the islands, your status. I will make it a personal priority to work with all sides and with the Congress to enable the issue to finally be resolved.
Indeed, Puerto Rico's status is an ambiguous one. The former Spanish colony was invaded by the US at the end of the 19th century and remains to this day a semi-autonomous US territory. Its 3.9 inhabitants hold US passports but cannot take part in a US presidential election. They have limited representation in Congress in the form of a non-voting delegate. While Puerto Rico has authority over its internal affairs, its government, which is based on a republican system, is subject to US jurisdiction and sovereignty. Most Puerto Ricans do not pay US income tax, but do pay for US Social Security and health care. 4 referenda in recent decades have failed to clear up the island's murky status. The latest was held in 1998, coinciding with a century of US domination. Once again, Puerto Ricans refused to become the 51st US state. However, nor did they favor independence, in what many saw as a pragmatic economic choice for an island where more than half the population still lives below the poverty line.
3 weeks after China's devastating earthquake, anger is growing at the way many schools seem to collapse like a pack of cards while nearby buildings survived. Thousands of children died in the rubble of their classrooms, and grieving parents blame corrupt officials and poor quality building materials. Today is Children's Day in China. Tragically, many of the young victims were the only child in the family under China's controversial one-child policy. President Hu Jintao has seen for himself the growing anger and desperation. It's his biggest political challenge. Young friends, today your classrooms are intense, but I assure you that the party and the government will rebuild your schools and will make sure things are done properly. Is that okay? One of Israel's most charismatic politicians has died at the age of 77. Tommy Lapid was a man of many parts. He was a journalist, author and TV presenter before entering politics. He scored his greatest success in 2003 when his staunchly secular Shinui party won 15 seats in the Knesset, and he became Deputy Prime Minister in Ariel Sharon's government. Tommy Lapid was born in Novi Sad in the former Yugoslavia in 1931. He survived the Nazi Holocaust and emigrated to Israel in 1948. He retired from political life in 2006 and devoted his remaining days to the Yad Vashem Holocaust Memorial in Jerusalem.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Booster ignition and liftoff of Shuttle Discovery.
The Space Shuttle Discovery is on its way to the International Space Station, on board the main section of a 14-ton Japanese science laboratory called HOPE and a 10-metre-long robotic arm. It's also carrying a new pump rushed from Russia to repair the station's toilet, which broke last week. Astronauts have been having to flush it manually, which takes 2 people 10 minutes to do. A first for this mission is the brand new external fuel tank designed after the Columbia disaster. It's aimed at minimising the loss of insulation foam. However, it's reported some foam did fall off 3 minutes into this flight.
Urban art from around the world is moving from the motorway underpass and into the art gallery. A comprehensive collection from artists including the reclusive Banksy, Pinky and Blek Le Rat are on show in London before being auctioned. Banksy began by spraying graffiti in his home city of Bristol. The sky-high prices now commanded on the mainstream art market are a world away from those beginnings.
As I always say to anyone, you buy what you want on the wall. So at the moment, obviously, street art or urban art, as it's being sort of coined in the last 6 months, is obviously relating to our culture a lot more than more traditional pieces will, hence why there is such a take-up in this market.
Other names from the UK movement include Inky and Nick Walker, but there are also some Brazilian artists included in this show, like Ramon Martins and Carlos Diaz.
In this collection there is a range of styles and nationalities, and the Brazilians, for instance, their work is very colourful and really reflective of their culture. Blek Le Rat from France, extremely politically motivated. Obviously the Britons here, we have represented Banksy, Nick Walker, Inky, Dr. D, political, subversive, cheeky, fun. Moving on to the Americans, scene really shows as the pioneer of the graffiti letterform style.
Some critics pour scorn on Banksy's work as a fad for lightweight art fashionistas, but his images can still fetch hundreds of thousands of pounds, dollars or euros, and they grace the homes of stars like Christina Aguilera and Angelina Jolie.
Armenia, Noah's route, your route.
After an epic 9-month journey through space, the NASA probe Phoenix has landed safely on Mars, the first spacecraft to land in the Martian Arctic. After traveling 679 million kilometers, Phoenix entered the Martian atmosphere, beginning a perilous descent at 21,000 kilometers per hour. As water only exists on Mars now in the form of ice and vapor, one of Phoenix's objectives is to probe the history of water that might have existed in liquid form in the Arctic as recently as 100,000 years ago. Phoenix will analyze the soil's composition of life-giving elements such as carbon, nitrogen, phosphorus, and hydrogen.
Let me show you, we are all the way up at 68 degrees north where this little dot is positioned, way up next to the polar cap, but not on the polar cap. There's a big distinction. So there is soil overlying the ice, and we are going to be investigating that situation.
But Phoenix will also search for the presence of methane in the Mars Arctic region. It'll do that by comparing data from the European Space Agency's Mars Express spectrometer, which has already found traces of the organic compound in the red planet's atmosphere.
Methane cannot stay forever in the Martian atmosphere. On Mars, it was said methane had a lifetime of the order 300, 600 years. That implies that methane is destroyed, therefore there must be a source of methane. Now, on Earth, it's well known that the source of methane is mostly life.
A number of missions are now studying the possibility of some kind of life on Mars. It's hoped that Phoenix will make an important contribution to the knowledge of a region of the planet which until now has remained unexplored.
A look at the week's top stories now in Flashback.
Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah has said his organisation will not use its weapons for political ends in Lebanon. He also told thousands of supporters in southern Beirut that the Shiite group did not want to take power in the country. Nasrallah was speaking as part of the celebrations to mark 8 years since Israeli forces pulled out of southern Lebanon. The rally coincided with the first full day in office of President Michel Suleiman. The former army chief said he'll start the process of appointing a prime minister and government on Wednesday. 16 cabinet posts will go to the anti-Syrian majority in parliament, with the role of prime minister expected to be given to either Saad al-Hariri or the man last in the job, Fouad Siniora. 11 cabinet portfolios are reserved for the pro-Syrian opposition minority, which includes Hezbollah.
With fuel prices soaring across Europe, British lorry drivers have taken their protest against the costs right to the door of the UK government. Hundreds of truck drivers converged on London in lengthy convoys that caused widespread traffic disruption. The hauliers say they're struggling to stay in business.
I had 3 trucks of my own, but come January I just had to get rid of them, the rising cost of the fuel and everything. So I sold them. I had 3 really good drivers, and that was the bit that really hurt me, was to get rid of my drivers, but I had to, because at the end of the day, if I didn't, the company was going to go under.
Bosses like Martin Ochcock want the government to give them a rebate as essential users to keep the country moving. Britain has the highest fuel tax in the EU, and the price surge is hitting drivers here particularly hard. The cost of diesel has risen by 1/3 since this time last year. The protests culminated with the handover of a petition at Downing Street. Under fire, Prime Minister Gordon Brown will be mindful that similar action over fuel costs in 2000 severely dented his predecessor Tony Blair's popularity. Leaders across Europe may well have been watching events in the UK with a wary eye.
On the other side of the English Channel, the French fishermen's fuel strikes have continued and look set to spread around the European coastline. In France, a €110 million government aid offer last week was not enough to end the blocking of ports and fuel depots by fishermen. Yesterday, a union in La Rochelle narrowly voted to continue the protest, hoping for the support of their European counterparts. Their colleagues in Spain have joined the strike action, with the Portuguese, Italian, Greek and Maltese set to wade in by the end of the week. French President Nicolas Sarkozy this morning turned to tax changes as a solution. He told the French radio station, "I will ask our European partners, if the price of oil continues to rise, shouldn't we suspend the VAT tax part of oil prices?"
La fiscalité pour sa part TVA sur le prix du pétrole.
But the European Commission disagrees, saying changing taxation to combat inflation sends the wrong message to oil-producing countries, namely that they could increase prices. In any case, the Commission added, such a decision would need the agreement of all 27 EU members. Life sentences for France's serial killing couple. A court in northern France has ordered self-confessed serial killer Michel Fourniret to spend the remainder of his days behind bars for the murder of 7 young women in France and Belgium. 66-year-old Fourniret raped or attempted to rape his victims. His wife, 59-year-old Monique Olivier, must serve at least 28 years in jail for acting as his accomplice. She helped select, trap and hide the bodies of some of the victims, who were aged between 12 and 22. The crimes were committed between 1987 and 2001. Relatives of the victims spoke outside the courthouse. The verdict is satisfactory for the families in that the sentence handed down is very heavy. I want this to be a lesson to other perverts, to know that one day they will be brought to justice. The pair could still face trial for 2 other murders, including that of 20-year-old British student Joanna Parish, found dead in Burgundy in 1990. The trial revealed serious failings in the French policing system. Fourniret's first conviction for assaulting a young girl was in 1967. He met his wife while serving a sentence for multiple sexual offences in the early 1980s. His first murder victim vanished in 1987, less than 2 months after his release and just a few kilometres from where he was living on parole. No inquiry was ever launched into her disappearance. Even after convictions for numerous offences in the 1990s, including the assault of a woman, Fourniret's most heinous crimes remained under the police radar. It was only in 2003, after a girl they were trying to abduct escaped, that the pair's acts started to become apparent. Olivier told Belgian police how she hunted virgins for her husband, and Fourniret admitted to killing 8 of them. The case provoked a shake-up in French investigative procedure, which included better coordination between different authorities. Fears in Britain that knife crime is growing out of control has led the government to launch an awareness campaign directed at young people. Grimly realistic images will be distributed through social networking websites and mobile phones, as well as through traditional media outlets. As London's police chief Sir Ian Blair explains, it's not that crime figures are rising, rather that the age of the victims is falling.
Violent crime in London is falling, gun crime is falling, knife crime is falling, but that doesn't matter to the public and to parents in comparison to the fact that the number of young people dying from knife and gun crime has reached an unacceptable level. 27 last year, 15 already this year.
Those figures for London are mirrored across the UK. Police say the most common weapons carried are kitchen knives. The new campaign will also feature adverts urging mothers to discuss knife crime with their children. Sir Ian Blair has warned young people they face prosecution if found carrying a knife. More than 200 arrests have been made in on-the-spot searches in London in the last month.
Thousands of Spanish fishermen descend on Madrid to protest against rocketing fuel prices in the latest wave of demonstrations sweeping Europe. In Spain, Europe's biggest fish producer, the fleet stayed in dock, bringing the industry to a complete halt. It comes as fishermen's leaders from Spain, Portugal, France and Italy have been meeting in Paris to coordinate protests in the run-up to the European Union Fisheries Ministers' meeting. This fisherman said, "We are here to get a better price for fish. We sell cheap fish and then the consumers have to pay up to 400% more in the shops and markets. There's no minimum price for fish." Marine diesel has risen some 300% over the past 5 years, while wholesale fish prices have remained static for 2 decades. Because of my age, I'm going to break up my boat and retire. There's no future in this if they don't increase the price of fish. We can't pay for the fuel. The protesters brought along around 20 tons of fish to distribute free to the public. The European Commission claims it's willing to show flexibility towards the industry, but has ruled out subsidies to offset rising fuel prices. More than 100 countries have formally agreed to ban the use of cluster bombs.
No objections.
However, the debate now moves to the loopholes that could benefit powers such as the United States, which refused to take part in the Dublin conference. Along with the US, China, Russia, Israel, India and Pakistan have rejected the pact. Michael Martin is the Irish Foreign Minister.
What we've succeeded really in doing is stigmatising the use of cluster bombs, and that will have a knock-on effect in the years to come, where countries who weren't even here, I think, will come on board in terms of in the practice, in terms of the utilisation of such munitions. That's what happened with landmines in the past. It's our view that's what will happen here in terms of cluster munitions.
Cluster munitions contain bomblets that are scattered from planes or artillery shells. Opponents say they cause indiscriminate injury. Gigi Gaia is from the International Security Service.
Well, the main actors you have are the United States, the United Kingdom, and you also have Israel, India, Pakistan and China are the main users. There are 34 producers in the world, and there are 76 countries which stockpile as well. And the aim of this actual treaty is to actually put a ban completely on producing and stockpiling these weapons.
Tom Casey from the US State Department said the elimination of cluster bombs from US stockpiles would put the lives of US soldiers at risk. While the US shares the humanitarian concerns of those in Dublin, cluster munitions have demonstrated military utility, he said. At the age of 82, Ian Paisley steps down as leader of the Democratic Unionist Party after nearly 40 years at the helm. Paisley hands over the reins of power to his deputy of 28 years, Peter Robinson. On Thursday, the firebrand Protestant preacher will also step down from his post as First Minister in Northern Ireland's Belfast Assembly.
But would you like to see one Unionist party?
I would like to see one Unionist party carrying out what we have seen carried out in the past years, moving this country more and more to a place where unionism is not looked upon as an import, but it's looked upon as a real Ireland party.
Peace was brought to Northern Ireland by the 1998 Good Friday Agreement that provided for devolved government from London, shared between the Protestant majority and the Catholic minority. Paisley's political stance has changed beyond all recognition. Sinn Féin and the IRA were once sworn enemies of the DUP throughout more than 30 years of sectarian violence and bloodshed.
Because pictures are the first language of EuroNews.
This is EuroNews, with the news on the hour.
Swiss voters have rejected a proposal by the right-wing Swiss People's Party that would have made it more difficult for foreigners to become naturalised citizens. The controversial proposal aimed to give local communities the power to decide by a popular vote which immigrants are granted a passport